Well, it is great to have all of you guys with us here today. And to those of you that are perhaps listening on the other side of a computer screen somewhere online, we are so thankful that you have joined us as well. We're actually in the second week of a message series called How to Be Rich. And if you missed last week, I'm going to sort of review, but I also want to tell you that I think it would be great if you guys would, if you missed last week, if you would go to our website, yourjourneychristian.com, or our Facebook page and find a link there, because there's a link there to last week's message. And it would be great if you would give that a listen, because what we're doing in this particular series is we're building kind of like layer upon layer, or as the Bible would say, precept upon precept. And so if you missed last week, you really missed a lot. But I want to give you a quick review regardless. Last week, we covered some good news and some bad news. If you were here last week, what was the good news? We learned last week. The good news we learned is that we are rich, right? We are all rich. I know you might not think of that. And some of you might be saying, oh, Robert, I don't feel rich. Well, that's because you missed last week's message, okay? Go give it a listen. But what we discovered is if you go to a website called globalrich.org, and what they do is they look at being rich globally, not just comparing Americans against Americans. But what we found is that if you make $33,000 a year or more, you are in the top 1% of wage earners on earth. Isn't that amazing to think about? That so many people here in the United States are in the top 1% of the richest people globally. And some of you are like mega wealthy rich, because if you make anywhere near $80,000 or so a year of combined income, maybe you and your wife or you and your spouse, whatever, you're actually in the top 1/10 of 1%. Isn't that crazy? That's just crazy. There's no doubt about it. You and I, we are blessed. We are all blessed in so many ways, whether or not you have a huge bank account or a huge salary. God has given us, it's undisputed, God has given us more than we need, and that's good news, and that means we are all rich, regardless of our bank accounts, because we talked about these rich people opportunities that we all have, and it's kind of amazing. We are so blessed, and that was the good news. We also learned some bad news, though, and the bad news is we're rich, right? That's the bad news, and some of you might be saying, wait a minute, but we talked about why that is really, really bad news, not to mention that it brings problems. It brings real problems into people's lives. And I'm not talking just about, first world problems. Like some of our problems are pretty small, when you think about it. Like you couldn't get your hair appointment when you wanted. That's frustrating, right? Or they put onion on your hamburger when you ask them not to, or your cell phone coverage doesn't work well in your bathroom. And so you can't do business while you're doing business, right? And that's just unsatisfactory. But it's not only those kind of problems. It's really what I would call rich people problems, because we also have significant spiritual challenges because we are rich, because we have been so blessed. It brings with it some of these significant spiritual challenges that are actually going to be some of the greatest challenges you're ever going to face in your life. And so last week we looked at the reality that because we've been so blessed, it's really hard for us to then learn to depend upon God, because we don't really need to most of the time. Most of the time we can handle problems that come up into our lives, and so we don't depend on God like we probably should. It's really easier for us to put our hope in what we have, right, than to put our hope in God. And the second thing that we looked at last week was that our wealth sometimes can distract us from true priorities, because we have these rich people opportunities. We've been so blessed with so much more than most people in the world have. We have opportunities, and these opportunities can take us away from the real priorities of life, the true priorities of life. And the third thing that we realized last week is that because God has blessed us so greatly, we now have a tremendous responsibility. Right? Because God has given us more than most people in the world, and you can't dispute that. And because he's given us so much, he also expects so much from us. Jesus said when, much is given, much is required. And so what I want to do today is like kind of building on those ideas. I want to talk to you today about what the Bible refers to as the deceitfulness of riches. That's actually the phrase that is used in Scripture. Jesus actually said this. It's recorded in Matthew's Gospel, in the 13th chapter. And Jesus was telling a story, and he would often do this. He would tell stories, or what the Bible would call parables. And we're told that Jesus, when he was teaching, he never taught without using one of these stories, one of these parables, to help people kind of understand and connect the truths to their lives. And so Jesus told a very famous parable. You probably heard of it. It's called the sower, the parable of the sower. And he said a farmer went out to plant some seeds, to sow some seeds. And as he scattered the seed, he dropped some seed on various types of soil. And then Jesus goes on to describe what the result of that was. And when we find out that when some of the plants started growing, Jesus said that the seeds that were planted in the soil that had a lot of weeds and stuff in there, that represented the deceitfulness of riches, and it could choke out the word of God. And Jesus goes on to explain to his followers that this was a metaphor. These guys, the followers, the disciples of Jesus, they would listen to Jesus teaching, and then often afterwards they would come to Jesus and they'd say, Jesus, what's the deal? What did that all mean? I mean, these guys weren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, and Jesus would explain it to them. And so later on, he explains to his followers that this is a metaphor. And he's saying that the deceitfulness of riches of this world, it can actually choke out our spiritual growth. It really can, because it can distract us. It just heads us in the wrong direction, and it's such a challenge for us. So let's just kind of dive in and talk about this idea of the deceitfulness of riches today. And I'll give you a great example. I don't know if any of you guys, you ever been to one of those places, like maybe when your kids were young, or you just liked it, when you a pizza place, you go to the pizza place, and after you eat the pizza, then the kids can go and play these games, and you can win these tickets if you play the games really well. How many of you guys remember? Yeah, a lot of you guys do, right? So you know what I'm talking about. You win these tickets. And when you're playing, did I mention that it's okay for adults to play every now and then, right? Every now and then, if your kids aren't doing it right, if they're not winning enough tickets, you got to sort of move them out of the way, and you take over on skee ball, right? Because it's all about the tickets. You got to get some more tickets, because we tend to believe, and even if you've been through this drill before, we tend to believe that if you get enough tickets, you're going to get a prize, and that prize is going to be so amazing, it's going to change your whole life. If you get enough tickets, you're going to get the prize. And so you go and you drop your tokens in here, and you play skee ball or whatever. You win like 743 tickets, and then you go to cash them in. They have a little desk. You go in there, a little counter, and for all of those tickets, 743 tickets, you probably get something like this. This is what I got last time I went, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because you go back next time and you're just like, well, you know what? If I get enough tickets this time, I'm going to get that prize on the top shelf, and it's going to make me happy. Now, when we grow up and we become adults, the tickets change. But we still believe that if we get enough of these tickets, then we're going to be happy. And then we're going to be satisfied. And then we're going to be secure. And then we're going to have significance, right? See how that works? The problem is these tickets, they promise way more than they can deliver. They really do. You think you're going to get what matters most, and then one day what you find out is that they don't deliver on what you had hoped that they would. In fact, as we talk about the deceitfulness of riches today, I want to just share with you kind of a key thought. And if you're taking notes, it's this. It's on the screen. The world wants you to serve money. It really does. The world, the system that we live in, wants you to love and serve and buy into the idea of serving money instead of serving God. And Jesus kind of explained it like this in Matthew chapter 6. Jesus talked a lot about finances, about money, about possessions. So many times Jesus addressed this. And he goes on to say that no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and you will love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. That's what Jesus said. And then he said, you can't serve both God and money. Isn't it interesting that Jesus didn't say you can't serve both God and your job, or you can't serve both God and popularity, both God and your favorite social media platform? What he said was, you can't serve both God and money. Why do you think Jesus said that? Why do you think that Jesus spoke so much about possessions and money and how we interact with all of that? I would suggest that it's because money is a very attractive false god. Jesus knew Jesus absolutely knew that for many of us, money would be the number one competitor for our hearts. And for so many of us, money and the things that money promises, that you can buy, that will become possessions and money and getting more. That will become the number one competitor for our hearts. You can't serve both God and money. You can't put them on the same level. Now, why is money such an attractive false god? Well, you can think about it like this. Because money promises things that only God can provide. Money promises what only God can give to us. And you might say, well, what does money promise? Well, it promises many things, but I'm just going to talk about two specific things this morning. For one thing, money promises to bring you happiness, doesn't it? It says if you have enough of me, then you'll be happy. Then you'll be satisfied. Then you'll be content. Money promises happiness. And even though we hear that saying, money can't buy happiness, we still think, well, let me try. Maybe you just don't know where to shop or whatever, but money promises happiness. The second thing that money promises is security. If you have enough, then you'll be secure. No matter what happens, you've got this little nest egg or whatever. I mean, just think about it. We've all bought into this idea. If I just had a little bit more, if my stack was a little bit bigger, then I could buy that thing which would make me happy and secure. And I don't know what it is for you guys. Maybe it's, if I had more money, then I could buy the shoes that would match the dress, that would match the hat, that would match the bracelet, which I got for 50% off, right? That's how we think. And then this outfit will be complete, and then I'll be happier. Maybe it's, if I just had that new smartphone. Oh man, if I had the newest smartphone, and this is hard for me to say because I just got a new smartphone for Valentine's Day. But if I had this new smartphone, then I'll be popular, and then I'll have a date for the prom, and then maybe I'll get married instead of being unemployed and miserable my whole life as a single person because I'm a loser and I didn't have what I needed to be happy. If I only had a house with a fourth bedroom and another bathroom or whatever, if I had a newer car and it had a sunroof or whatever, if I could only have someone help me clean my house, then I'd be able to go out and have my nails done. Ladies, just remember, when you get your nails done, you do it for other ladies, right? I mean, it's not for the men in your life because guys don't care a bit, and that's just a fact. I have never heard one guy in my life ever say to another guy, dude, did you see the set of nails on that girl? Man, look at those nails. I wonder if they're real. Nobody ever says that, right? If I only had this, though, then I would be happy. But I want you to listen to this, and this is true. You need to embrace this. The truth is, it doesn't matter how much you have. Only God can provide lasting joy and true security. And you can get more, and you can get more, you can get more, and you're still going to want more and more and more because money does not provide that happiness or that satisfaction. Only God provides lasting joy and security through his son, Jesus Christ. Money promises what only God can provide. Now, most of us would say, when we were in church and we'd say, well, I would never serve money. I don't love money. I mean, I don't serve money like that. But I would argue, and rather gently too, okay, if you've ever bought something that you didn't need with money that you didn't have to impress people that you don't even know or like, you might be falling under the deceitfulness of riches because you're believing that, these tickets, what it buys would make you happy or bring meaning into your life, but it never does. If you've ever compromised your integrity and you created an expense report that wasn't accurate, or you cheated on your taxes, or you told your 14-year-old, today you're 12 because you're going to Disney World and 12 is cheaper. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, he shaves every day, okay, but he's only 12. If you've ever done that, you are kind of serving money. You're under the illusion that more money is going to bring more meaning to your life. If you've ever compromised your family and you kind of neglected them, believing that you were providing more for them by constantly working overtime, though. If you've ever neglected your family when what they really needed is more of your time, then I would argue that you may be under the spell of the deceitfulness of riches. And what's happening is, look, it's a false god, okay? It's promising something that it cannot deliver. And so since we are rich, and we need to just kind of acknowledge that, okay? That's just the baseline premise. We talked all about it last week. Because we are rich, we want to be good at being rich. And so our key verse was part of Scripture where Paul is actually talking to Timothy, a younger guy, and Paul is kind of coaching him as a young apostle. And he says, Timothy, when you deal with rich people, because you're going to encounter rich people, here's how you can help them. And here's what he said in the first 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting in verse 17. He said, command those who are rich. And we've already established that's us, right? We have to acknowledge that. Command us, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. And here's the part we're going to focus on today. And then he goes on to say, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so, what? Uncertain, right? And we know that, right? It's uncertain, but instead, they should put their hope in God, who richly provides for us with everything for our enjoyment. Tell those rich people, don't put your hope in wealth, which is totally uncertain, but instead, you should put your hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Notice that God is okay with you enjoying the blessings in your life. God's not mad because you're having a good time or because you live in a high standard of living. God provides richly, but he goes on to say in verse 18, command them to do good, though. These rich people, these people that have been blessed so much, command them to do good, to be rich not only in finances, but to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous, and to be willing to share. Command them, don't put your hope in wealth, because that's totally uncertain. Put your hope in God, and be generous. Now, if you were here with us last week, we had a key kind of statement and went like this. If God has blessed me with more than I need, what am I? I'm rich, right? That's the standard. It's not you compared with other rich people. If God has blessed me with more than I need, then I am rich. And each week we're going to kind of add a little bit to this statement, and it's going to get a little bit longer as the weeks go on. And this week we're going to add this. I will not trust in riches, but I will trust in God, who richly provides. So now it's this. If God has blessed me with more than I need, I am rich. I will not trust in riches, but in God, who richly provides. And the problem is, even though we know this, even though we're saying this today, and you may embrace this in your heart, the problem is money continues to scream at us every single day. If you had more of me, you'd be happy. If you had more of me, you would feel more significant. If you had more of me, you would be more secure. And what I want to do is kind of drive these thoughts deep into our hearts today and show you 3 problems that I can see. 3 problems for those of us who love and trust money. And if you will just drop your guard a little bit and work with me this morning, I believe that you might see yourself as I do. I see myself in one or more of these challenges. The first challenge is this. If people who love and trust money, number one, they will never, ever have enough. They never have enough. If I was to ask you, and this is not sinister, I mean, if I was to ask you today, are you satisfied with your income? Chances are you'd say, no, Robert, I'd like to get a raise. I'd like a little bit more. And if I said, are you satisfied with what you have in life right now? You might say, well, no, I kind of, my dream is to have this or a little bit more. And honestly, that's not bad, okay? I'm not saying that's bad at all, as long as it's within reason. But the chances are that can also kind of be an indicator that we have, or we're moving towards, growing to love and trust money, and we're under the influence of the deceitfulness of riches. And Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, in the book of Ecclesiastes, which I recommend you read it, especially if you're over 40. If you read Ecclesiastes in your 20s, you're going to say, this is such a bummer. Why is this even in the Bible? This is so depressing. And then when you read Ecclesiastes and you're over 40, you'll go, oh my God, he's talking about me. He knew what I would be going through. But in Ecclesiastes, Solomon said this. He said, whoever loves money never has enough. Now, never is a very strong word, isn't it? He said, whoever loves wealth, they are never satisfied with their income. And if we're always wanting more, I can promise you, it doesn't matter how big your stack actually gets, you're still going to want more. And in fact, if you kind of love and trust money, I were to ask you, how much money do you need? If I just ask you this question today, how much money do you need to be happy? Can you answer that? How big does your stack need to be, folks, to get to that point where you feel secure? And the answer is generally a little bit more than I currently have. I told you last week, the richest man, when I was a kid, the richest man in the world was J. Paul Getty. And I remember seeing an interview with J. Paul Getty, richest man in the world. And the interviewer said, you're like in your 80s or whatever, and you're still working, you're still investing. I mean, how much more do you need? And he said, just a little bit more, right? It's always that. It's always the answer every single time. If you love and trust money, it doesn't matter how much you get, it's never going to be enough. You're always going to need more. And many of you, you don't believe that. You don't believe it because you haven't had enough yet. You haven't had more yet. But you watch. Many of you guys, you might have twice as much today as you did 10 years ago. And you weren't happy and satisfied then, and you're not happy and satisfied now. You still want more. And you'll get more later on. I believe that you guys will progress and all that. I can just tell you right now, though, I don't want to burst your bubble, but it'll never be enough. It won't be enough either because it's an illusion, okay? It's the deceitfulness of riches. It's promising something that it can never deliver. In the book of Proverbs, in chapter 18, verse 11, it tells us, and I absolutely love the imagery in this verse. It says, the rich, which is us, right? That's us. The rich think of their wealth as a strong defense. You know what? If I get enough money, I can just buy my problems away. I can buy away the bad things that happen in life. These bad things aren't going to happen to me because I'm secure. I have this money. I'm going to have this insurance. I'm going to have this, safe deposit box, whatever it is, but I'll have this, and this will get me through that. They think of their wealth as a strong defense, and they imagine, notice that word right in there, they imagine it to be a high wall of safety. That's what they imagine. But my friends, it's only in our imagination. We're imagining that if our stack is big enough, we'll be happy. If our stack is big enough, we'll be secure. And you know what that is? That is the deceitfulness of riches. That's really what that is. It promises something that it cannot deliver. And if I haven't got personal yet, just hang on, because I think I'm going to get to you, right? I'm going to offend everybody today. I'm sure of that. I'm an equal opportunity offender. The second thing is this. People who love and trust money, number one, they never have enough. And number two, they find it increasingly difficult to give. People who love money, they find it increasingly difficult to be generous. Because I know beyond a shadow of doubt, there are many of you here who would love to give big, right? You just don't feel like you could afford it. I'm guessing there are many of you who would love to tithe and give offerings every single week on a regular basis because you really believe that this is a wonderful principle. This is a wonderful thing. It's a scriptural thing. And it would be great to worship God just as he calls for with 10% of your income. You believe in what God is doing through the church, and you believe that you would like to do even more, but you just can't afford it. You wish you could. In your heart, you really wish you could, or you'll see someone in need. And you'd think, wow, I'd really like to be able to help that person out. It'd be great if I could help them. I'd love to be able to give that waitress a big tip because I know she's going through that. That person can't pay their rent. I'd love to be able to do that or whatever. But you feel like you can't afford it because in your mind, your stack is not big enough yet. And what's crazy is, but it's been proven over and over and over again in study after study, is that the wealthier that people get, on average, the smaller percentage they then give. Right? Well, 10% of 33,000 is a lot, right? 10%, if you're making $33,000 a year, 10% is a lot, but it's a lot less than 10% of $80,000, isn't it? Do you know who gives the largest percentage in churches on average in our country? It's not those that are super wealthy. According to a 2019 Share Faith article, people with a salary of less than $20,000 a year are 8 times more likely to give consistently and a higher percentage than someone who makes $75,000 a year. Isn't that crazy? Now, obviously, there are exceptions. I'll just tell you, without calling out names, we have some outrageously generous people who are doing really well financially here at Journey Christian Church. And I'm blown away by their level of generosity. You guys are just awesome, and it's amazing. But we're talking about the average. We're talking about the American church. It's been proven over and over again that the bigger the stack is, the smaller percentage that people give. And I'll just be direct, folks. That's not how to be good at being rich. It's not. That's not how to be rich and honor God. That's really more like how to be self-centered and kind of selfish and be bad at being rich. And when you look at it, Jesus, I'll tell you this though, this is true. Look it up. Jesus didn't care much about the amounts that people gave. He really cared more about the percentage and the heart of the giver. That was really, really, really important. One time, and this is not a parable, this is actually a true story. One time, a very poor widow, she's a widow. She had no ability to have any real sort of income. A widow that in that society back in Jesus' day, they had to be cared for by the church. They're very poor. It was much harder to be poor back then because there was no government safety net at all or anything like that. And so this little widow, she went into the temple. She went to church. She comes to church. And as they're taking up the offering, she puts her 2 pennies or 2 mites, two very small denominations, a little bit, almost nothing. She puts 2 pennies in the offering. And I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. But Jesus saw this and he said, okay, everybody look, this little lady, she gave more than anybody else here today. And the thing about it is there were all these rich Pharisees. They were there and they had given big offerings. They were there too. And truth be told, they had given more in their amount. But Jesus wasn't impressed by that. He was looking at the percentage. And this lady, she gave it all. She gave all that she had. She gave 100%. How can someone with no stack at all give everything she has? Well, the reason was she wasn't trusting in her stack like we tend to do. She was trusting in God, who richly provides. That's what she was doing. We're incredibly blessed. And we tend to say so often, I know I do, I'll give more when. I've said this before. You know what I mean by that? Like, I'll give more when I get this credit card paid down. Or I'll give more when I get a raise. We'll give more when we finally get the house that we want. Or we'll give more after we get the kids through college. I'll give when, right? That's good. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to a church that he had planted in Corinth, and the people in Corinth, they weren't wealthy. Okay, they didn't have a lot. And fact is, times were tough. And yet, they were still incredibly faithful, and they were very, very generous. And Paul talks about them in his letter, and he praises them, saying this: in the midst of a very severe trial, they're going through bad times. Their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty, though, it welled up into rich generosity. For I testify, this is Paul saying, I am a witness to this, that they gave as much as they were able to give, and even beyond their ability to give. Listen, we're responsible to be generous. Now, God, we are rich. We've been blessed by God. He calls for us to be generous. We're responsible to give, and we're responsible to give now, right? We should give now because we have been blessed now. We shouldn't have to wait for it. We've been blessed by God, and we should give, and we should give generously. And I just need to let you know that as a church, as Journey Christian Church, we've decided, our leadership has decided, and the people have decided that we will be good stewards. And we're going to be generous in what we give to our community because we truly believe it's more of a blessing to give than to receive. And we're going to be generous globally for the mission of God's church globally because we believe in it and we want to be good at being rich. And God has blessed us with more than we need. And we are rich. And we're not going to try to just build our stack and maintain our stack. We're going to trust in God, who richly provides and will continue to provide. He tells us to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. And that's what we're going to do. Because we're not going to fail on this one, folks. We don't want to be bad at being rich. And still this stuff says, hey, it's all about me. It's all, if you have enough of me, then you're going to be happy. But the real problem is if you love money, you never have enough. You'll find it increasingly difficult to give. And the third thing is this, if you're taking notes. If you love money, you'll have money in the bank. Yeah, sure thing. But you'll have no peace in your heart. Right? You might have money in the bank. Excuse me. But you'll have no peace in your heart. And some of you might say, well, technically, Robert, I don't have a lot of money in the bank, so you're not talking to me. But yeah, okay, so you don't, but you still got toys in your pocket, right? I mean, you still got your cell phones, right? You still got clothes in your closet. You got something nice maybe in your garage. You got food in the cabinet. You're blessed, okay? But if you love all this stuff, you can have all this stuff, and you're still not going to have peace in your heart. In Proverbs chapter 15, Solomon said something that's a really important principle. And honestly, my gut feeling is that most people don't believe this to be true. But Solomon said it. I want to read it to you anyways. And I think when you come to believe it, it can change your posture and how you do life. But he said this. He said, better is a little bit with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Better a little with God than great wealth with all the stress and turmoil of the world. Better just a little bit of stuff than a lot of junk with no God. And it's better to have a little and have a lot of God. But most people don't believe that. I can illustrate it. I told you guys last week about my friend years ago. He passed away a number of years ago. His name was Don Means, and he was truly a multi-millionaire. He's a friend of mine, and we're pretty good friends. And it was kind of odd because we would hang out. I was in the Navy and just barely getting by. And he told me one time we were sitting in his backyard around his fire pit, which was just, I couldn't believe, I was around a guy that was this wealthy. And he used to love to hear me tell stories about what I did in the Navy and stuff like that. So we're talking. And at one point he said, Robert, I got to tell you, I would trade places with you in a heartbeat. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm all for that. But really, I was kind of confused. And he saw the confusion on my face, and he went on to explain this. He said something, and I'll never forget this. He said, I envy you, Robert, because at least you can hold on to the illusion that money would bring you happiness. And he went on to say that, he said, from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I finally fall asleep at night, you know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about my money. I've got all this money. He wasn't always rich. He'd grown up poor, but he saw it for what it was. And he said, I'm always worried about my money. Where is my money? Is this working? Is this not working? Am I paying this guy too much? Is this person taking advantage of me? All of these rich people problems. And we often hold on to this illusion, I know I do, that money would make me happy and it would make me secure. And that's what most people think, because you don't really believe what Solomon said here, that better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with all that stress and turmoil, because with great wealth comes massive problems. Problems like you don't even know about, tax problems, accounting problems. Besides the fact that it makes it harder for us to depend upon God, it distracts us from true priorities. And then it means that we have a greater responsibility. We still want to give it a shot. And here's the deal. You might not be a millionaire. You might not be a millionaire or even making $100,000 a year, but you're still rich. And when we continue to put our hope and trust in money, it takes us off track from what matters most. And let me just say this as lovingly as I can. This is difficult because I'm a little bit in your face, but it's because I care about you. There are some of you right now, you make more than your parents ever made. Maybe you even make more than you ever thought you would make in your life, and yet you're still struggling, right? You think you are. You're still financially strapped. You're still miserable. And sadly, you're thinking, if I just had a little bit more, that would solve my problems. And you already have way more than you ever thought you would have. And the reason why you're still financially struggling or strapped is because you consume everything that God has given you. And quite honestly, there are other people around the world that maybe make a third of what you make, and they're not stressed like that. And they look at you and they can't figure out why you're so bad at it. Why are you so financially stressed? Because they realize it's better to live on less. It's better to be a blessing. It's better not to buy all of this stuff. It's better not to fall under the spell of the deceitfulness of riches. And the bottom line is this. If you honestly believe that more money will solve your problems, you're under the influence of money. You're under the influence of the deceitfulness of riches, because more money won't solve your problems. You think it will, but it won't. What will solve most of your problems is more Jesus Christ. And so listen to me. More Jesus will solve your problems, yet some of you still don't believe it. You just don't believe it. You really think more money is what you need. But really, more money is not going to keep your kids off of drugs, is it? More money is not going to make your marriage better. I mean, if you don't love each other when you're broke and you got no money, you're not going to love each other when you begin to fight about finances all the time. More money is not going to cure the person you love of cancer, is it? More Jesus is what we need. More Jesus brings intimacy, it brings healing, it brings focus, it brings power, it brings purpose. What it does is it brings the divine into this world, which is what we need. We need more Jesus. So instead of saying, I want more money, you're never going to have enough anyways. What you need is more Jesus. I want more Christ. I want more of his purpose. I want more of his direction. I want more of him, and I want less of me. And I don't want to be distracted by the things that don't last anyways. I don't want to trade all my tickets for a stupid finger puppet and then realize it's just going to fade away. I want to use what he's given me for his glory. And therefore, I'm not going to wait to give till later. I'm going to give now because I've already been blessed now. And at whatever level, whatever giving big means to you, give big wherever you are. And you don't have to do it here at our church. I mean, listen, I don't get a percentage from this stuff at all. I'm just teaching you what the Bible says. But give, and give big somewhere. Be generous. Not later, but be generous now. And don't settle to walk around with money in the bank and stuff in your closet, but no peace in your heart. Jesus is peace. He is the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace in your relationships, to know that you're serving him, to know that you're walking the path that God has said. That is a peace that you will have that you won't even be able to describe. It's more than you ever thought, and it didn't cost what you thought it would. You see, we're not going to serve money. And money, understand that money is neutral. Money's not bad. Money's not good. A lot of people misquote the Bible. They say that, money is the root of all evil. No, it's not. The love of money is the root of all evil. We don't want to fall for the deceitfulness of riches. We don't want to serve money. We want to serve God. And we're going to pray together. I'm going to have the worship team come back up here, and we'll begin to